Tonight, we will hear from two of our playwrights in our Plays in Progress program. This program is to help playwrights create new work around public health topics. And at Elevate, we believe that the process is just as important as the product. So we encourage our playwrights to be bold, to take risks in their creativity. So, without any further ado this evening, I would like to welcome our two playwrights, ChelseaDee and Courtney Alex, to the Elevate virtual stage. I would love to hear a little bit about protocols and a little bit about Line to Hope so our audience gets a sense of what are these two shows about? So ChelseaDee, why don't you tell us a little bit about protocols?
I started working on this piece. Thank you for believing in it. It's called The Protocols. It's inspired by the emergence of artificial intelligence in our kind of day-to-day pop culture understanding of it. I've always wondered, where does this intelligence come from? And what I recently learned is that these are machines and that they are trained on data sets. But then that begs the question to me of, where is this data coming from? What does this mean? What does artificial intelligence being introduced into our caste-based society? What does it mean for us? What does it spell for the future? And so I imagine the protocols takes place in a slightly future time where the world water wars have just ended. And there is a Black battle veteran who lives in like a facility. I haven't quite figured out exactly where she lives, but she lives someplace where she is tasked with training these robots, training this artificial intelligence program. And the artificial intelligence program is a mental health companion, and it is designed to be a permanent companion in the later years of people's lives. And so as this veteran trains this artificial intelligence program, they learn what they have in common in this society that they're working within, and the seeds of revolution are planted. Let's just put it like that.
Courtney, tell us a little bit about Line to Hope.
So the play that I've been working on, like thanks to Plays in Progress, is called Line to Hope. And the premise is simply that we start with a character who is kind of let's see, classic, your white, straight, cis man who is also feeling homicidal and suicidal, right? And has kind of been in kind of steeped into some pretty like far right extremist ideologies that I think can be quite harmful to those who hold them, and also of course to those who are harmed by them. So we've got this person who's feeling all these really intense feelings, holding all these really intense ideologies, and he reaches out to a friend, luckily, and tells them about what he's going through. And the friend says, hey, maybe instead of committing this crime that you're imagining committing right now, why don't you reach out for help instead? Here's actually the line for a crisis line, a crisis hotline. And he takes the person up on that and calls a crisis hotline instead. And the play is basically like that kind of lead up, and then mostly the interaction that he has with the crisis line worker. And then we kind of find out more about the crisis line worker themselves and what they're kind of going through on their ends to support this person through this really intense moments in their lives, and kind of to get to the other side of that, which is usually the point of a crisis line call. So that's what it is.
What I love about these two pieces is they are starkly contrasting, yet probing really important current events: mental health, political polarization, the access to mental health services with your piece, Courtney, and thinking about crisis hotline workers, thinking about mental health workers, and then ChelseaDee thinking really critically about AI and its prevalence and its emergence in our society and how we're going to be using it. So thank you both so much for thinking through things really that are really relevant and really juicy for our everyday. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your process and what you're excited about with your piece. So Courtney, why don't you start us off with what you're excited about and anything you want to share about your process?
Definitely. Well, I was gonna say, my process is also really tied to what Plays in Progress does mean to me, because Plays in Progress has really allowed this play to come forward. But so I would say, like, initially there is this kind of incubating, germinating kind of period for me. And for this piece, it was kind of there for quite a while. I mean, I myself worked on the crisis hotline many, many years ago, and then I initially got the idea of kind of making it into the play a couple of years ago. So it's something that it's like a story I think that I've been kind of holding onto and has been growing within me. And then it's really a matter of like carving out the space and time to let it grow, which Plays in Progress has given me that time. And I really have to sink into the world of the play in my experience, which with this play is kind of difficult to do, because I mean, I had a lot of experience kind of sinking into the world of someone who has suicidal thoughts. One, because I've worked on a crisis hotline, and two, because I've also trained clinical intake workers to do suicide assessments. And so I've practiced doing a lot of like role plays with like young or like new clinicians who might get on a call with somebody who's in crisis. But sinking in also to the character that I was describing earlier is definitely something that I have a lot of resistance to because of my own ideologies and my own belief system. So again, like Plays in Progress was really like, okay, like you got this. Here's some time and space to do that. And like self-care and intentionality and just like time is really important to be able to like be with that person, so that I could write him. And so it's really a matter of just getting still enough to allow that idea that has been within me to come out, and like to be able to not get too, like, let's say, like overwhelmed or dysregulated by the telling of that story too. And that's something that, like, Christina and I have also worked on to kind of how do we tell this story in a way that also is like not so intense that like audience members also don't get like overwhelmed or dysregulated by the story. So that's been a big part of my process with this play.
Yes, I mean, it requires a lot of research because it's out of my personal wheelhouse. I'm not really a technologist. And so this is something I'm having to learn about as I go. And I think that's a huge part of my creative process is research. It's combing social media and picking up newspapers and reality being stranger than fiction. So, there's just so much around to see, and so that's been a real inspiration for me. I will say that I end up collecting a lot of articles. I end up collecting a lot of video clips, things that I need to watch. And so, Courtney, what you're speaking to about time and stillness, time to be, time to let ideas emerge, I think that is why Plays in Progress was such a huge deal for me because I was like, oh my goodness, I have time to read all these little articles that I'm like collecting and scrolling away. And I think there's a way in which writing helps me make sense of the world. And so this is a topic that I'm like, I need help making sense of this. And the creative process for me right now is untangling all of the reasons why this piqued my interest in the first place. And then it's ever evolving. There's a new product, there's a new app, there's some type of social crisis that's going to evolve into a legal battle. I mean, there's like things happening constantly. So yeah, I feel like the play is even now still being there's even more information I'm still gathering. So yeah, research is huge for my process. Research and time.
How far into the story do you usually plan before you start writing? Do you know already, or do you already have the ending planned, or do you start writing and then see where things go? And ChelseaDee, I'd love for you to answer that, and then Courtney, I'd love to hear about how you went about your piece.
That's such an interesting question. I think for me, it starts with is dialogue. I feel like I hear people saying things, and then I just capture that, and then it starts to expand into series of scenes or series of moments. And then I have to take a step back and figure out what is this larger, larger thing. So for me, I feel like it's the moments, it's the pieces, it's my background is in acting. So I feel like the characters and their whole psychology emerges. And then I'm like, okay, okay, well, now they're in the room talking to who is this? Oh my god. And now we have from there, the rest emerges.
Really don't know. Definitely don't know from the beginning
Happen.
what's gonna happen. And I've actually never been like an outline person. I'm more like just dive in, start writing, and like see where it goes. And that was very much my process in this. It was just kind of like I got to start writing it and I got to start going through kind of like what ChelseaDee was saying, like go through the process and start like the dialoguing of the characters in your mind. And then and I mean, and that's how I used to be on the calls too, right? It's like you do get trained with a certain script, and so like you kind of know what you're supposed to say, but you also can't like plan ahead of time because everybody's going to call in with different things that they're going to say. So you kind of have to like internalize like the basic script, but then it's a lot of improving. And so for my process in writing was also very like I kind of had to see what emerged as I started getting into that world. And then it came.
Wow, that's so interesting. It's sort of like macro micro, right? But it's hitting on some of the similar theme of you've got to kind of have a foundation of what you want to write about, but then the it changes and evolves as you get into it, similar to your call, where you've got a foundation of what to say, but depending on who's on the other line, those tactics may need to shift or change, right? That's really beautiful. Chelsea, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, like, especially with like new play development, someone framed it for me like it's the play is a universe unto itself that is emerging through you. And like as writer, sometimes you want to like figure out what the thing is, or you want to tell it what it is, but a lot of times the idea is occurring to you as is fully formed, and like you have to kind of pull it out, you know what I mean? Tease it out, invite it out, but it is its own thing. And the question is, how do you honor what what that is?
But we have another question around have there been any parts or aspects of your play that were hard to edit out or remove? I wonder who's had some removal of things that they want to talk about.
I mean, one thing that comes to mind for me was that I didn't want to use racial slurs in the play. I thought that that would just be, I don't know, kind of too easy in a way. And it was just something that I just didn't want to. I just didn't want to. And I'm a white playwright as well, and I'm speaking about racism in the play is one of the points that comes up, and it just felt too violent, I guess, also. And so I think, I try to kind of make this character believable, so that like you do believe that he holds the beliefs that he does without needing to kind of use certain words. And so that was important to me in the writing of it, so that it can still, and I think it does. I think it still does come through, right? Like what he thinks, how he believes, that like who he discriminates against without like having to use like certain violent words.
That's like a really interesting, maybe not an edit to remove, but an edit of like before I even get there, I'm going to be creative about how this person shows up.
Exactly.
Um, Chelsea, I imagine you're not quite at the editing phase
I'm
yet.
so
So
lucky.
what do you
I
think?
get to I get to keep all my babies. I don't have to edit out of anything quite yet. But that I mean that's kind of I guess to speak to my process. It's like I like gumbo in a way, put it all in, let it cook, and then I have to figure out like, well, what is this really about? And then I'll start to cut the fat and cut things away. But it's always painful. It's not okay because it's like it comes from your heart, and you need people like Christina. You need like outside eyes to be like, maybe we don't need 2 pages of this monologue, maybe just one. So
So we have a question. How do you protect your mental health when diving deep into the mind of someone who is suicidal or homicidal? Any advice for taking care of your mental health when you're dealing with emotionally draining situations? Thank you so much for that question. I think that's going to be something we talk about a lot when we're producing and promoting the show. So Courtney, let's get started with that right now.
Totally. Yeah, I mean that's like a common question I think that like therapists get in general too. So, any therapist in the house, definitely like drop your tips and tricks into the chat as well because there is kind of a like, we have to constantly be facing suffering and empathizing with suffering and empathizing maybe with beliefs, points of views, ways of living that we like have our internal like cringe reactions to, but we still have to show up and be supportive. And so, I mean, what I was going to say too, and I think another one of the questions farther down is like, what is our creative process going to be going into the future? And so this also kind of aligns with that for me because like one is meditation. Meditation is really key for me, and like I was saying before, kind of getting to a place where I can just be still and breathe. And also I do this in the play. I have the crisis line worker do this with the main character, and I do this a lot with my clients, and I do this with myself, is also like coming to the body, and like how do you feel in your body. And so one thing that I do, like even during like difficult calls or difficult clients or even just difficult moments in my own life, is also um, kind of resting my awareness on my body and any uncomfortable sensations that are really jumping out at me, and then really working to apply compassion to that, or like self-love, self-care, and even if you can't like fully get to self-compassion, just some kind of like kindness is what I say. Like if you can just bring up some kindness for the suffering that you're noticing in your body, and that can be a really, really powerful tool.
Okay, 2025. There's lots of change in the world. There's lots of new political, social, and public health. I'm going to call them opportunities that are coming our way. Um, and there is big change on the horizon. So I'm really curious, how are you using your artistic practice now and into 2025 to fortify you? And what might you be looking forward to going into 2025? Chelsea, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a real, I think in times like this, where it's like so many opposing, polarizing forces, it actually is an opportunity for some clarity around where you stand. And so, what I'm excited to see in 2025 for myself and society is a real clarity around community and where we stand and what we're going to do and how we're going to work and getting to work because that is what the time calls for. So, I'm excited to see that action. I feel like 2025 is going to be like, you know, rubber to the pedal to the metal, rubber to the road. So I'm excited for that.
Like ChelseaDee said, I think that like with the current, sea change, tide change establishment that is rolling in across the United States, I hope that it'll be a sort of like, I can't think of the physics term right now, but basically like whatever action comes, like an equal and opposite reaction, right? Is that what it is? And so I hope that, yeah, like I'm excited for the resistance that will be here in response to this wave that is coming. And I'm also excited for the conversations that continue to be spurred by the performances, right? Like by, ChelseaDee, like I love this topic of like AI and what AI is bringing to our society. And then, like, and with my play too, around like gun violence and these extremist points of view. I mean, even already tonight, like there's, the questions and conversations and like how do we also extend like beyond the like across the aisle, is another important thing that like I try to do with this play, and I hope that these conversations have to happen, and we're being forced to have them in 2025, so I'm excited for that.
I am so grateful for this conversation. I think we got some really good nuggets and juicy behind the scene elements. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening for our brief 2024 celebration. There is so much more to come in 2025. And don't forget to be well and elevate.